All right. If you've made it to this point, congratulations. Only 2 more videos to go. Ugh. All right. So, teaching reading. Um, you might think that your kids all know how to read. Of course, they know how to read Spanish. That doesn't mean they know how to read in English. We do have a reading curriculum that goes along with the rest of the curriculum, and it is important because studies have shown that the more students read, the better they write. So it really does have an effect on their learning overall. Um, so the books, we have books in the office. If you're already here, you've seen them. If not, you will. They are in bins that are leveled. The bins are labeled. I think depending on how many books there are, some of them are broken up into different groups. But there's 0 to zero point 0.9, 1 to 1.1 to 1.5, up to I think 4 is the highest, 3 or 4. Um, the idea of these levels is so a book that is leveled 1.4 is a book that in the US or in an English speaking country, a first grader would be able to read in their 4th month of school. 1.7, a first grader in their 7th month of school. Um, our kids are not on these levels at all. They are typically, I would say most kids are in about the 1 range, including the older kids, and that's primarily because they don't have enough vocabulary even for, even a 1.9 book would be probably too hard for some of the ninth graders because they really just don't have the vocabulary yet. Um, with the books, we don't allow the kids to take them home, and we don't keep them in the classrooms. Those books were all either donated or purchased in the U.S. specifically for the school, and then shipped down here. So they cost a lot to get here, and if they are ruined, we don't have any other ones. So I have had teachers who bring the books into the classroom and the kids destroy them, and then they're like, well, that's okay, we can just get more, we can't get more. So the same way I'm a little bit anal about rules, I'm a little bit anal about the books as well, just because I know how much they cost to get here and how difficult they are to get. um, so you do really have to teach the kids how to treat the books. It is very rare that Hondurans have books in their homes. They have a TV, they definitely don't have books. So one of the ways that we do that is we teach them books are babies. If you wouldn't do it to a baby, you shouldn't do it to a book. It works because the word baby, a bebé, are pretty much the same in English and Spanish. And the older kids find it funny, the younger kids understand it, so it's pretty good as a universal rule. Would you bend a baby in half? No. Would you put a baby on the floor? No. Would you put water on a baby? Well, no. We're going to go with no. Um, would you be nice to a baby? Yes. Would you put the baby back in his bed? Yes. So, you can kind of play with it a little. But usually what happens is, if you teach it to them enough times, you'll come into the classroom with books and the kids will go, babies! And the minute you see something, you can say, would you do that to a baby? And the kid will say no, and then they'll pick up the book off the floor or whatever. Um, with the reading curriculum, the book that we use for the reading curriculum uses different levels. Rather than re-leveling all the books, I have a conversion chart on the wall by the books. So if you ever, if you see the level in letters instead of numbers, just go over to the conversion chart and it will tell you the equivalent numbering for that letter. Okay, so how to teach kids how to read. This can be easier, it can be complicated. So obviously you want it to be as easy as possible. Um, Reading is just talk written down. So that seems supernatural to us. Some of the kids, if they're not familiar with books, they don't really get that quite yet. With the younger kids, you can show them how to point to the words as they go along. You can have them move their finger as they read so they start associating the word with the sound. There are also 2 philosophies when teaching kids how to read. So the one that I think I learned how to read using was the bottom-up philosophy. So this is teaching all of the letters and sounds and then putting them together to make words. This is really difficult for ESL students because they never get that aha moment. So for instance, when we were younger and we were sounding out a word, we were ka-at, cat, cat. We have that moment where we know what the word is. ESL students, they're not going to have that moment because chances are they don't know what the word is. They don't have that vocabulary. So instead, I recommend a top-down structure. This doesn't mean that you're not going to teach the letters and you're not going to teach the sounds. It just means that your focus is going to be on the meaning of the story rather than on, diphthongs and all of those other things. So using pictures and reading the books to them with them until they start to recognize the words. This method is more effective, especially for second language learners. They don't need to know how to sound the words out to start learning how to read. You instead just focus on sight words. So this would be, starting with a book that perhaps you make, because chances are we probably don't have one this basic, but the house is red, and a picture of a red house. And that way, when you say the house is red and you point to the picture of the house, the kids can go, okay, the house is red. This makes a lot more sense than books like See Spot Run, See Spot Walk, See Spot do whatever Spot does. That's not how we talk. So it's kind of, like hop on pop and things like that. They're not really good for ESL learners because they don't make sense with the pictures. So I'm not even going to just say for the younger kids. For any grade that I've taught, I make books. I also, especially when they're low level ESL, once they get better at English, then you don't have to do this. But I make reading comprehension things and I make the books because it's so hard to find things that are at the appropriate level for them in terms of their vocabulary. So if you make the reading comprehension and you make the book, you know that they understand every word in it because you've taught them the words or that they know them from last year. So for the younger kids, this could just be I like dogs and a picture of a dog and someone with a thumbs up, and then I like cats and the same thing, and then I don't like spiders and a thumbs down. They start to understand the idea. If you're going over like and don't like, it's a good complement to that. For the older kids, what I do too, and I think I mentioned this later, is I make books. So for instance, I mentioned that with 5th grade I was doing places. So I made a book about places. In Brisas del Valle, there is a cafe, but there isn't a pizzeria. And so then, you have a picture of a cafe, and then you have a picture of a pizzeria with an X through it, and the kids can draw the pictures themselves too. So I'll talk a little bit about that later when I go into book bags, but yeah. So pictures come before writing for kids. So you can have them draw the picture and then write what they say about it and show how the words connect. So like if they say, for instance, the house is red, you can show them, look, I just wrote the house is red. That'd be for the really younger kids. Most of us are probably teaching kids that at least understand that, reading and how reading works. But when assessing difficulty levels, so just to give you an idea, if a child can read all of the words with 95% or more accuracy, that is considered a good independent reading level. So that is why a majority of the books that we have are still not appropriate are not appropriate levels for our kids, because with 95, if they need to be at 95%, that's a pretty it has to be a pretty low level book for them to have that amount of accuracy. For the younger kids, read to them every day. So this is what the person who wrote this is a reading specialist in the US, and she calls that a non-negotiable. So it's something that you have to do with them every day. I would say 3rd grade even, they love it if you read to them. So just having a story time, reading a book to them every day, or reading a couple, can be a really important thing in their learning, and they really have a good time with it. Have a word wall, so I mentioned this during vocabulary, and then break into groups based on level when possible. So this is in the reading curriculum typically, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, but there are ways of leveling their reading level. in our reading curriculum guidebook. So like I was saying, you can make books with them. So for the younger kids who are learning how to read, they can be simple. I love my family. I love my brother. I love my mother. I love my father. And then they draw the pictures that go with it. For the older kids, you can use the grammar and the vocab you're currently doing and have them draw pictures that go along with the sentences. And then something I've done in the past that I learned from this reading specialist is you can have them make a book bag. So just even a Ziploc bag that they get to decorate with and put their name on it. And they put all of the books that they make in that bag, and you can keep it at school, or they can keep it in their backpack as long as they bring it back and forth every day, which is dicey. So some of them will do that, some of them will not, but it's up to you. And then that way they have their own personal library, and it's all books that they helped make that they can read. So that's a pretty cool thing for them, especially because most of them don't have books at home. So a lot of times the kids will get really excited and will pull these books out and show them to their brothers and sisters and things like that. There's some other activities listed here that you can take a look at. So writing a sentence on a strip of paper, cutting it up, mixing it up, and having them put it back together. That can be helpful for grammar, certain sentences where the order of the words is really important. Yeah, and you can take a look at those. So when creating a reading lesson plan, it can be a good idea to do a lead-in. So, just getting them thinking about the idea of whatever it is you're going to be reading about. Pre-teach the vocabulary like we talked about in the vocabulary video, and then set the context before reading and listening. Try to let them know what it is that you're going to be looking for. Vary how students answer, so they don't always have to be answering the same exact way. And then, as always, you're linking the theme and concept to other lessons. So some people, with the footprints, it does this for you. But then, for the older kids, if you want to have a unit for each thing you teach, so, there are some people who have chosen just a unit and then have linked the grammar and the vocab to that every week and done a different unit each week. There's also in the Google Drive folder, a worksheet about asking the right questions. It's a little bit silly, but if you take a look at it, it can give you a sense of how you can answer a question correctly and not have any idea as to what you were reading. Your students will do this. So if you are basically using the exact same language in the question as you are in the answer and they don't have to think about it at all, they won't. So it's okay to ask a couple questions like that, but you also do want to be asking some questions that they actually have to think about, and show that they didn't just skim the reading, that they actually understood it. So our reading curriculum is based on this big yellow book that will either be in the office or someone brought it home to look at it, about guided reading. So guided reading is giving students books that slightly challenge them but not too much to help them improve, and helping them become better readers by reading, self-monitoring, problem-solving their way through texts, rereading as necessary for understanding. So teachers know when to help out with this. They know when to step in and scaffold and help the students become more independent readers. So rather than reading to them, you are helping guide them in their reading journey. Assessment. So as I was saying, there are assessments in the guided reading book that you can take a look at, based on the level and age of your students, more or less. So there's a pre-A is the first section, I think, and that would be for the very young kids. You probably couldn't do the assessments there with the older kids, but take a look at it and see. And then this assesses what level they would be at, and then you can from there make reading groups and work with them in those reading groups, so that way you can give different level books and different level activities to the different level reading groups. There is a video also in the Google Drive. So the reading specialist is actually um, my friend Amanda, it's her mom. So Amanda was down here. I ended up down here because of her. And she is the one who implemented this reading curriculum at my old school. So the video is up there for her. It explains just a little bit more in detail some of the reading stuff. She is also working as a reading specialist in the U.S. right now, so she has a lot more resources and things like that. So that's in the Google Drive. It's about 15 minutes if you want to take a look at it and you want a little bit more information. If not, the biggest resource is just going to be in that book. It's very easy to read. It's very well structured and presented. And the other cool thing is there are a ton of activities, and each of the activity is explained in detail, and then it is also has a link to a video where the woman Jan Richardson, who wrote the book, I think that's her name, she models that particular activity with a group of students. So it is really helpful. I've included some just straight, they were scanned from the book in the Google Drive as well. So you can kind of even see, so there's a pre-A one, and then there's an emergent reader one, I think, as well. That it gives you a whole lesson plan essentially, and then you just plug in what activities you want to do. So it's great too for lesson planning because it's all right there for you, and it's all really, really beneficial to the kids and their learning. The other thing I have in there from the textbook is a breakdown of why we do the different reading activities that we do and what the benefit is to the kids. So I think that can be really important to know as to why you're doing reading in small groups, why you're reading aloud as a class, and how is it helpful to the kids. And then the last thing is talking about the first 6 weeks in terms of creating a reading workshop with your students. This woman says that I think it's with kindergartners that she's working with, that she's able to do a completely independent reading workshop of stations where the kids move around in stations on their own for up to 100 minutes, which I'm like, all right, more power to you if you can do that. But she sounds kind of like a wizard. But it has the idea of just how to set up reading stations and how to help the kids become independent in those reading stations. So stations are great no matter what age your kids are at. And so, yeah, so just take a look at those things. Again, let me know if you have any questions. And this also might be something that you're starting to get to when you're about 2 weeks into teaching. It's not going to be the first thing that you're going to be doing, probably. So just keep that in mind.